My pastor has a saying that hope changes everything, and so I want to talk about hope today. Hope is something we need all the time in our lives, but especially right now. Well, I'm going to tell you a story from the Bible that doesn't start out very hopeful. It's a story about the Israelites, and it happens right after the Jews from the north had been taken captive, and there were still some Jews living in Jerusalem at the time. And they're being attacked now by the Babylonians, and they're under siege for a very, very, very long time. They've gone without food for, I don't know, long enough that they're eating things that, let's just say, you would never even consider eating. And eventually the Babylonians break through and start just slaughtering people with the sword. And a lot of this had happened because they weren't being faithful to God. And God had warned them over and over and over that this was coming, and they weren't believing the prophets at the time. And so what happens is the remnant that hasn't been killed is taken captive to Babylon. And the Babylonians were known for when they'd be taking their captives, they would put hooks in their noses and lead them away on a rope. So incredibly painful and humiliating. And here are these people that I'm sure are just incredibly discouraged. They are going to now be taken as captives into a land that they don't know, a language that's unfamiliar with them, and their whole identity has been changed. The Babylonians also came in and destroyed their temple. And so they're being forced to live in a foreign country. And so imagine this, they're being led away, they are defeated, they are hopeless, they are just in the midst of intense struggle. And this is what God says to them on the way. This is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. What do you think he's going to say? I mean, they've been disobeying. Are they going to get punished? Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So in the midst of being taken away as captives, God speaks once more through prophet, this time Jeremiah, and says, a very, 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 very familiar verse that Christians quote constantly that I don't think most people know the context. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. In the midst of everything they're going through, this is what God tells them. Well, what is the hope in the future? Let me keep reading. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. So in the midst of this amazing distress, God doesn't say, see, I told you. God doesn't say, look what happens when you don't listen. God says, okay, this is where you're at, and now this is what I have for you. Plans to prosper you and to give you a hope and a future. And he talks about bringing them out of captivity, having this intimate relationship, seeking the Lord and finding him, and getting them back to their land, okay? So this is what God promises his people that have been obstinate, that have not listened over and over and over, and they're being taken away captive. Now, that might sound hopeless, but to me, I feel like there's so much hope in that, because if you're having a great day and somebody goes, oh, God's going to give you hope in a future, you're like, okay. But when you're in the midst of struggle, when you're in the midst of just feeling hopeless, when you're in the midst of a loss of identity or just feeling like you have no future, to hear God saying, I will give you hope and a future, and part of that is this intimate relationship with me. Well, this was for these people at the time, right? So what does God tell us now? Well, God doesn't always offer us an immediate escape from our hardship, but he always offers to be there through the hardship with us and promises. He gives us promises for the future of hope and of good things and of good plans. Well, right now is a really hard struggle in our lives with COVID and everything else. And what is the promise God gives us? Well, this is the promise that God gives his children. So two of them I want to quote for you that I hold on to during hard times like now. So this is God's promise to his people for hope and a future. Revelation 21:4, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And of course, he's talking about heaven. And Revelation 7:16 through 17. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb, Jesus, at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Is this a future and a hope and a promise that you want? God promises this to his children. And even if we don't know what's going to happen in the next day, month, or year, this is a promise that if you're a believer, you can hold on to. I just want to say, woohoo! That excites me. All right, here's your joke. Oh, here it is. Have you heard the latest joke about the skunk? Never mind, it stinks.